Okay, so today is a little different. I'm giving you a graph, and I'm asking you to write the equation. So we're going backwards a little bit, okay? I have 4 different graphs that we're going to go through, and then I have kind of a word problem of it. Write an equation of the parabola. I'm giving you the intercepts, and I'm giving you a point that it passes through. Or I'm giving you the intercepts, the X-intercepts, and a Y-intercept, and I'll show you what to do with that. Okay? So let's start with a picture. Now, I also have all of this stuff that we've been practicing writing down. Yeah? Can I fill out any of that information now?
Yes.
Well, first off, I know that there's a minimum, right?
Yes.
So I can at least circle minimum.
Yes.
Do I know what that minimum is?
No.
Not yet.
No, because it's not a nice grid line crossing, right? I don't know what the vertex is right now, right? I don't know the Y-intercept because I can't see it. What the Y-intercept would be where it crosses the Y-axis? Can't see it, right? Well, it will cross it eventually. It's just not on my graph. I can't see it. What else do I know, though? What were the easiest points that I told you about yesterday?
Oh, the X.
The domain is all real numbers, right?
Oh, yeah, the domain.
That's the easiest one. Okay, so write the equation of the parabola in intercept form. Remember, intercept form is y equals a parentheses x minus p, x minus q. And p and q are just 2 random numbers. Those are your intercept values, right?
Okay.
Can I see what my x-intercepts are?
Yes.
I look like I have one right there, which is the point 3, 0, and one right here, which is the point 6, 0. So I know that my equation is y equals something. I don't know what the a value is, right? But then it's going to be x, let's see, if 3 is my intercept, what does it look like in parentheses? Minus 3. Remember, because you have to change that sign when you take it out? Remember that? And then if 6 is my intercept, the other parentheses is going to be minus 6, right? Oh, and I have an a right here that I forgot to write in. Hey, pretend like there's an a there. Okay? Now, how do I find out what a is? Well, that's where this extra point comes in. If you notice on all of these graphs, there's an extra point that I plot for you. What are the coordinates of the point that I plotted for you there?
2, 8.
2, 8. And if I look at that point, I have an x value and I have a y value. So I'm going to take this, y equals x minus 3, x minus 6, and here's how I'm going to solve for a, and then I'll just fill it in right here, and I've got my answer. I'm going to plug in 8 for y. I don't know a, but what am I going to plug in for x? 2. So 2 minus 3, and then 2 minus 6.
That makes sense.
So let's see, what is 2 minus 3? Negative 1. And what's 2 minus 6? Negative 4. What is negative 1 times negative 4? Positive 4, right? So I really have 8 equals 4a. How do I find a?
Divide by 4.
Divide by 4, and a equals what? 2. So I can put my 2 right there, and there's my equation. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay. Now the other stuff, I should be okay with as long as I can find my vertex. As long as I can find my vertex, I can find out most of that stuff, right? So, what do I know about my vertex? I know it's exactly halfway between 3 and 6, correct? This is stuff we did yesterday.
Yeah.
What is exactly halfway between 3 and 6? 4.5, right?
Yeah.
Or 4.5? Now, since I'm not graphing, I don't need all of these different values in my XY chart. I just want to find out about the vertex. So I'm going to take that 4.5, and what am I going to do with it?
Plug it in.
Plug it into the equation I came up with. So, 2 parentheses, 4.5 minus 3, parentheses 4.5, minus 6. You follow?
Yes.
And I get negative 4.5. Does that seem reasonable according to where it is? 4.5, does this look like it could be negative 4.5?
Yes.
Sure does. So, my vertex is 4.5, comma, negative 4.5. What's my axis of symmetry?
X equals 4.5.
X equals 4.5. What is my minimum value?
Negative 4.5.
Negative 4.5. X-intercept I still don't know yet. I'll get to that in a minute, but what's my range?
Y is greater than or less than.
Greater than or equal to
Alright. That's what I mean.
negative 4.5. So I'm almost done. I just have one more thing, right? My y-intercept. What do I know about my y-intercept? My y-intercept is always the point 0, comma, something, right? It's opposite of these guys. So all I have to do is I just need to make x 0, plug in one more value, and I have my y-intercept. Okay, so plugging in 4.5 gave me my vertex. This gives me my y-intercept. So if I plug in 0, I have 2 parentheses 0 minus 3 parentheses 0 minus 6, and I get 36. So my y-intercept is 0.36. And that seems like a pretty high point, but since my graph is going up and it's not really close, it seems reasonable that it could be 36 before it hits the y-axis. If I got negative 36, there would be a problem because it's not going to hit the y-axis down here. Right? So? Most of that's the same stuff. This was the different part, mainly.
Do we still have to put the highlight?
No, because you're not graphing, you don't need to put the axis of symmetry. You just need to write the equation of it right there. So? Okay. Let's try number 2. So, what are my intercepts? It looks like negative 1 and... So, negative 1, 0, and 5, 0. So I know my equation is going to be y equals a, whatever a is, and then negative 1 would look like x plus 1, and positive 5 would look like x minus 5. How do I find that a value? I use the other point. Do you notice anything about this point?
Yes.
What is it?
It's
Is it the vertex?
yeah, it is.
This is the point 2, 9. How do I know if it's the vertex? If 2 is exactly halfway between negative 1 and 5, which it is, right? So let's see. What's my axis of symmetry?
X equals 2.
X equals 2. My vertex is 2, 9. Do I have a maximum or a minimum?
A maximum of 9.
A maximum of 9. Y-intercept, I think I can see on the graph, can't I?
Really?
What is it?
It's 5.
0, comma 5.
Yeah.
Domain.
All the numbers.
Range.
Y is less than or equal to.
Am I done?
Yes.
Nope.
I mean, you still need the Y.
Still need to find A, right?
Yeah.
Forgot to do that. I got sidetracked because I found out all the other information. Now, one thing I do know about A is it's going to be negative because this thing is opening upside down, correct?
Yep.
So whatever I get for A, it should be negative, otherwise I did something wrong. So I'm going to use this point 12, 9. I'm going to plug in what for Y? 9 equals A, parentheses 2 plus 1, parentheses 2 minus 5. So that means 9 equals A times 3 times negative 3. So 9 equals negative 9A. And what does A equal? This way? So A equaling negative 1, I can write negative 1, or if I want to look super smart, I can just write the negative because we don't need to write a 1. Okay? So some of them will be very easy to find all the information. Some of them maybe not so easy, but some of them will be very easy. So? Yes, sir.
Where do you get the 2 from when you put the 2 in for the x?
I was using these coordinates. I used this x value and this y value. Whatever that other point is that's given, you use that for x and that for y. Okay? So? Can I keep going?
Yeah.
I feel like I still hear people writing this down. And I don't want to rush you. I want to make sure you get it. Yes? Question?
How did you get the Y-intercept?
How did I get the Y-intercept? I looked right here because this one is actually on my graph. So I just looked and I saw that that's the 0.05, so that's my Y-intercept. When it's off the graph and I can't see it, that's when I have to put a 0 on an XY chart and plug it in to find it. Okay? All right, let's look at number 3. Okay. This one's a little different. What do you notice about this one?
There's no, I mean, never mind, right there.
How many intercepts do you see?
1.
1. Didn't all the other ones have 2?
Yes.
Do you know what that means? When my intercept is exactly on the axis, that means, this is, by the way, -4, 0. It's going to look like x plus 4.
Oh, no.
And because it's the only one, this is what you do.
Oh.
All you do is write it squared. It counts as both of the intercepts.
I need to remember that.
Okay? That's going to be one that I'm sure will come up, and you may have a question on it. Like when it comes up on your homework, you're going to be like, what do I do with that? Okay? So I'm trying to star it now to remind you that I did do one like that. Capiche? What do you notice about that intercept? It's also what? The vertex. We like it when it's the vertex because that gives me a whole lot of other information. What's my axis of symmetry?
X equals -4.
Do I have a maximum or a minimum?
A minimum.
And that minimum value is 0. Can I see my y-intercept?
No.
No. What's my domain? What's my range?
Y is greater than or equal to -4. Wait.
Greater than or equal to 0.
Oh my God.
So I have 2 things to find still. I need to find my y-intercept, but I also need to find what? My a value, right? So I'm going to use the other point they give me. What is this point right here? -2, 4. And I'm going to use that to find my a value. So I'm going to plug in 4 for y equals a, and then it's going to be -2 plus 4 squared. So 4 equals a times, what's -2 plus 4? 2 squared. So I have 4 equals 4a. Divide by 4. And what does that mean a is?
1.
1. Do I need to write anything there for a equaling 1?
No.
No. Now can I find my y-intercept?
Yes.
How do I find my y-intercept?
Plug 0 into there, X.
I plug 0 in for x. So if I plug 0 in for x, 0 plus 4 squared is 16. So what's my y-intercept? 0, 16. Not too bad?
Nope.
Okay. Number 4. Is number 4 going to be easy like number 2 and 3, or is it going to be a little more involved like number 1?
More involved.
More involved. Why?
Because
Because why? Is my vertex a nice point?
no, it's not.
No, that's why it's going to be a little more involved. So, I do have my intercepts that I can recognize. This is 0, 0, and this one is 3, 0. Yes? Now, what do you notice about this intercept? It's my X-intercept, but it's also what? The Y-intercept. When it crosses through the origin, it's actually crossing through both axes at the same time. So my Y-intercept is 0, 0. Anything else I can tell? I do have a minimum value. Anything else I know? Domain is all real numbers. That's always my easy point, right? Okay. If anyone misses this point right here, then I know that you're not listening in class, right?
Yeah.
Because it takes like almost no brain power to find that, right? Okay, so how do I write my equation? Because I don't think that I should be writing x minus 0, right?
Just X.
I understand the x minus 3, but x minus 0 doesn't seem reasonable.
Just put X outside.
Because what is x minus 0? It's just x.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write x and x minus 3, and now I'm going to go find my a value.
Okay.
Okay? So what's my other point? My other point is negative 1, 4. So what do I plug in for y?
Net
4 equals a times x, which is negative 1, times negative 1 minus 3. And let's do some multiplying here. 4 equals a times negative 1 times what? Negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. What is negative 1 times negative 4?
4.
So what does a equal?
1.
So again, I don't need to write anything there. A is just equal to 1. So far, so good?
Yes.
Now, I have to do a little XY chart because my vertex isn't very nice and I don't know what my... Oh, I do know what my Y-intercept is, so I don't need to worry about that. But my vertex, what is halfway between 0 and 3? 1.5. So I need to plug in 1.5 to find my vertex. So if I plug that in, 1.5 parentheses 1.5 minus 3 gives me negative 2.25. On the graph, does that seem reasonable? 1.5 and then a little bit further than negative 2. That looks pretty accurate, yeah?
Yep.
So, axis of symmetry, what's that?
X equals 1.5.
X equals 1.5. Vertex, 1.5 comma negative 2.25. What's my minimum value?
Negative 2.25.
Negative 2.25. And what's my range? Greater than or equal to negative 2.25. Easy peasy? Okay. Now let's look at the last two where I don't give you a picture, I just give you the words. Okay? By the way, on the last two, you notice they don't have all of this stuff. Right? We just have to come up with the equation. All right. Write the equation. You know what? I'm going to do something fancy here. Watch this magic right here.
Whoa.
Now I have work. Now I have space to work.
That's magic.
I know.
Hey, hold up. How you do that?
I just folded those problems under. See? I just folded them. Now I have room to actually do my work here.
Did you get your drink?
I did, thank you.
I was like, she's still not here. It was like 7:50, and I'm like, okay, I gotta go still.
I must have just missed you.
Yeah. I was hanging out with this person.
All right, so from number 5, what information do I know? Write the equation of a parabola with x-intercepts of 4 and 11. And I know that my answer has to be in this form.
That's all we're doing.
Yep, I don't need to do the axis of symmetry, the vertex. I don't need to do all that for these guys. So I know they are telling me that I have intercepts of 4 and 11. And shame on Mrs. Franken, I really should have written those as 4, 0 and 11, 0. I should have written them in the appropriate form, but I didn't. Sorry. Well, I know that if 4 is an intercept, this parentheses is going to look like, whoops, not x plus, but x minus 4. You okay with that? And what is the other one going to look like if that's a positive 11? Okay. I don't know what A is, but I know I'm going to have a Y over here. I just need to figure out what A is. They tell me another point. In other words, that other point they're telling me about is like this point right here. So, if I want to find A, what am I going to plug in for Y? 6 equals A parentheses 1 minus 4 parentheses 1 minus 11. Now, I will tell you, on these problems, you may get a fraction for A. And that's fine because you don't need to do anything with that fraction other than write it in your answer. So let's see. 6 equals A, and then 1 minus 4 is negative 3. 1 minus 10 is, I'm sorry, 1 minus 11 is negative 10. So 6 equals A times, what's negative 3 times negative 10? Positive 30. So I'm going to divide by 30. And 6 does not divide by 30 nicely. But I can reduce that fraction. So what is 6 over 30 if I reduce it? 6 over 30 is 1/5. So my A value is 1/5. I write it right there. I don't have to do anything else with it. And I just box my answer right there. And I'm done. That's it.
Wow, that was bad.
Nope. All right, you ready for the last one? Are you sure you're ready for the last one?
No.
Positive?
Yes.
What's different between number 6 and number 5?
It's weird.
Be a little more descriptive than it's weird.
There's no other point.
There's no other point, so what are we going to do with that? Well, let's think about this for a minute. I know that I'm going to have y equals something parentheses x what? Minus 6 and x plus 1. And I need to know what is my coordinate point to plug in. What's my other point? Well, if they're telling me that I have a y-intercept of 42, that's kind of a backwards way of giving me a point. Because a y-intercept of 42 is the point 0, 42.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they are giving me a point, it's just not as clear as it was in the last one.
Wow, playing it.
So I just plug this stuff in. 42 equals A times 0 minus 6 times 0 plus 1. So 42 equals A times negative 6 times positive 1. So I have 42 equals negative 6A. Divide by negative 6. And what does A equal? Negative 7. Throw my negative 7 up there. And there's my answer. So it's exactly the same process as number 5. As soon as you recognize that when they give you the y-intercept, they are giving you a point. It's 0, comma, whatever that number is. Okay? All right. Happy studying.